Thank you for auditing Professor Skye's Record Review, the always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor who knows he's opening up a can of worms with the title of this video, a title which I chose very, very carefully. A feminist reading of Megan Thee Stallion's new album, Good News. Listen, I chose the title carefully. It is a feminist reading and not at all the feminist reading of this album. Now, mentioning the word feminism at all, I have learned in any context, especially on social media, especially on YouTube, is an invitation to get it from all sides. On one side would be those who know much more about feminist theory than I do, telling me that I'm not an expert and I don't know what I'm talking about and my view is too narrow. Feminism itself and feminist theory is huge with many different perspectives and different schools of thought. I am openly admitting that I am not an expert on feminist theory. I have taken classes in it. I even teach a class which uses the tools of feminist theory to approach French films and French books, but I am by no means an expert or the expert on feminist theory. It's the other side, though, that gets a little bit more vocal. Not those who think that I am applying a bad feminist theory to any kind of media or music. It is those who are mad at the mere mentioning of the word feminism. The kind of people who might say, why are you making everything political? People who want musicians to shut up and sing, basketball players to shut up and dribble, and music critics to shut up and give a grade, give a score, A+, C-, 8 out of 10, 10 out of 10, 0 out of 10. People who like to pretend as though it is possible that a piece of media, movie, music, television show, can exist in a society completely outside of the power structures that create that society and that mold that society. I'm sorry, but it is just not possible. Literally, every single piece of culture, every single piece of media that has ever been made could easily be studied through several critical lenses, not limited to, but including gender, class, and race. Everybody has the right, and I would even argue to some extent, the obligation to approach anything through these lenses, or to at least think of them through these lenses. Everyone has the right to present a feminist approach to anything. Now, I am not so arrogant to say that I have the feminist approach, and that is very careful. I am a language professor. A is an indefinite article. The is a definite article. And I am intentionally indefinite here. Okay? I completely accept that my feminist approach could be flawed, potentially even wrong. Okay? I am totally earnest when I tell you that if you're watching this and you think, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, how does he think he's such an expert? I want you to put in the comments how I'm wrong. You can even tell me that I am being unintentionally sexist, which may be true as well. I have no problem putting myself out there and being wrong. If your general argument is, oh, you're a stupid liberal and professors are trying to brainwash people, that's okay too. You can leave that as well. But it is not my interest to convert anybody, rather to approach something from this lens. So now that I've given that 3 minutes of Cartesian precaution, let's get to it. Okay, and let's talk about this album and let's approach it. I'm going to be also reviewing it. Okay, I don't give scores, I don't give grades, because if I review it, it means I like it. It's a good album. 8 out of 10, B+, I don't know. I don't do that on purpose. But with the issues of feminism, one of the primary ways to look at it, and the simplest way to look at it, is just a question of agency. For several millennia now, women in books or music or movies or whatever it is have always been in a position of being an object in a story and not the subject of the story, not having agency, not having the power to control things around them. They are just an object of affection. They are, in a sentence, not the subject that does. They are the object that is done to. And so Megan Thee Stallion, what's up with that extra E in her name? I read it as Megan Thee Stallion, but I guess it's Megan Thee Stallion. She's always the subject of her own story. She presents her perspective, and her personality is absolutely upfront at all times. It's a strong personality. It's an individual personality. It fits within a larger context of other rap artists and other female rap artists who have come before her, but it's still very much precisely hers. Now, maybe a counterpoint to this is that even though she writes her own lyrics, and she very clearly is a talented rapper who has made it based on her merit, not based on anything else, all the credits, it does seem to be, it's all produced by men. And weirdly, on Tidal, the credits, when you click on info for each song, there's two different people who work for A&R that have their billing above her billing, which is quite weird. But the main way that makes her interesting in this sort of context of a feminist approach to this album is obviously sexuality in the way that she presents it. She uses her agency primarily to talk about sexuality in very, very frank terms. Now, as a rap fan, it always frustrates me that most rap albums have at least one gross sex song. Like, that's just what I call it, just like, all right, because most rap albums are made by men. Most ones that I've ever heard of have been made by men. So it's like, I don't want to hear about how good you can do it, how long you are, how long it is. Okay, I get it. It's a bunch of kind of like performative, I can do this, turning the act of physical intimacy into some kind of sport at which you are the best. Here, she is defining herself largely by her sexuality. And she's doing it through her own sexuality and what she actually wants. But the real question is this actually progress? When so often women have been reduced, especially in hip-hop, have been reduced to just people who are capable of receiving the male sex act, people who are just sexual objects. Their entire value in hip-hop in general is either as somebody to be used for sex or someone's mother who they venerate and love. There isn't much in between that. In between those two poles, there is not much in the history of hip-hop in between those two poles. So is the fact that she is embodying this and taking over and taking possession and having agency in this sexual role, is it really progress? Yes, it is. But I think how much progress it is up for debate, and this is where the different schools of feminism get in, sex positivity and feminism. I'm not going to get into that. I will tell you that part of what makes Megan Thee Stallion so interesting is her participation in the song from the summer, WAP. And just so you know, I'm going to be using a lot of, swear words for sexuality, just because I can't talk about this album and hide it. So the song Wet Ass Pussy caused a scandal. And it was interesting because, I'm a Facebook friend with a lot of people from different sides of the political spectrum. And a lot of my friends who consider themselves to be very Republican or very conservative were really outraged at the song and really upset. I remember I saw one post that said, "Let me get this straight. We have to ban Baby It's Cold Outside because it's inappropriate, but Wet Ass Pussy is the #1 song in the country. Things have gone crazy." It didn't go too well when I explained the concept of agency and the fact that WAP, first of all, WAP is a good song, and second of all, it is actually a feminist song because the women themselves are making the decisions for themselves. But this is the thing. What it made me realize, and this is what people have realized for a couple centuries now, is that so much of misogyny, of the distrust and the hatred of women, comes from the fear of their sexuality. So it's not that women are not permitted to enjoy sex because that's wrong inherently. It's that men are afraid that they are not capable of giving that pleasure, that they don't measure up to the task of giving women pleasure. With that in mind, Megan Thee Stallion is complete nightmare for that kind of man who's very afraid of women's sexuality because it's not understood and it's seen as something that is far off and impossible to know and impossible to possibly achieve, and that will just leave. If you think to yourself, I don't know how to please a woman, and then you think women have power to be with men who want to please them, to accept this perspective, the perspective put forth by Megan Thee Stallion, is to accept that you will be alone forever and no one will ever love you or even hold your hand. That's terrifying. That's the origin of the hatred of Wet Ass Pussy. That is the origin of the hatred of this entire movement of hip-hop, which is very sex forward and very, very strong. I'm going to get to one very concrete piece of feminist theory here. Simone de Beauvoir was sort of a proto-feminist. She wrote The Second Sex. She's sort of well, I mean, I guess for a French professor, she's where I start when I teach feminist theory. She wrote a lot of great books, I mean, way before the 60s. She had a lot of interesting ideas. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to focus in particular on something that she wrote about Brigitte Bardot. So Brigitte Bardot, if you don't know, is probably, after Marilyn Monroe, the biggest sex symbol in the history of Western civilization, okay? Of all civilization in general. It wasn't even just limited to the West, okay? She was, in the 60s, considered the most beautiful woman that there's ever been. She was an international superstar. Everybody knew her name. Everybody knew what she looked like. She happened to be French. And she was very different than many other sexual, than even Marilyn Monroe, because the way that she presented herself was so much more in control. She was so much more, you know what, why are you letting me describe it? Let's let Simone de Beauvoir tell you about it. So here we have a real pioneer in a lot of different theories that would be called feminist theory. And this is for Esquire magazine in 1959, okay? Esquire magazine, by the way, subtitled A Magazine for Men. All right, so this is a men's magazine. And it was written in French, but it was translated into English when it was first published. So I'm going to be reading you the English translation from the time. And the way that she describes Brigitte Bardot, I think, is very much the way that Megan Thee Stallion could be described. She does as she pleases, and that is what is disturbing. She does not ask questions, but she brings answers whose frankness may be contagious. Okay? If every woman acted like Megan Thee Stallion, if every woman demanded pleasure, it could be contagious. I'm an insecure man. I hate this. Okay. It gets better. I mean, not it gets better, but I love this next part. Her eroticism is not magical, but aggressive. Now, a lot of what Simone de Beauvoir wrote about was trying to fight the idea of this sort of mystical feminine. Like, what is it that makes women women? What is this magic? And she was able to outline the sort of falseness of this dehumanizing elements of an idea of a feminine mystique and what makes a woman is a woman is a woman. And she destroyed all of that. And so here, this is a great description of Brigitte Bardot. Her eroticism is not magical. It's not some magical thing that she can do. It's aggressive. In the game of love, she is as much a hunter as she is a prey. This is the key. So Brigitte Bardot, like Megan Thee Stallion, is hunting as much as she is being hunted. The male is an object for her, just as she is to him. And that is precisely what wounds masculine pride. So here it is, described, 60 years ago by some old French lady talking about some old French woman, okay? All those years ago, and here we have it. The male is an object to her just as she is to him, and that is what wounds masculine pride. So if we could apply a kind of a feminist theory to this album, I think this is the best one to do, where she is constantly wounding masculine pride. She may be doing it by talking about how sexy she is and how appealing she is to men, and in that way, it's perhaps not as forward as we would want it to be. But she's sort of playing this game, the game that has existed, the game that is created by patriarchy, but she's making it explicit and taking some control over it. In that way, the thing that bothers me the most about this album, and the most about Wet Ass Pussy as well, is the embracing of this transactional nature that exists, where it's a trope of female rappers who rap about sexuality, that they are sexuality to an end. The end is not their pleasure. Most of the time, the end is not their pleasure. The end is a man giving them things. Men giving them money to get their nails done in this album, money to take a plane ride, to get a jet, to get jewelry, whatever it is. the fundamental semi-prostitutional relationship between men and women is supported by these kinds of lyrics. I give you sex, you give me stuff. But I was talking about this with my wife, and she was saying how, okay, it's true, but this transactional nature exists whether or not people rap about it or sing about it. It's very rare that human relationships anywhere in the world are not somehow based on this system of transaction. And it's obviously because of patriarchy has its ruled, with men being able to have most of the power, most of the control over the wealth that exists in the world, that this power exists. And again, it's the way that Megan Thee Stallion is able to take control of it and sort of be happy in it and seize on it. And she mentions several times that she can make all the money too. She can do it all. She doesn't actually need these men. She just likes having this money as well. So I would say that's the number one undercutting thing about this album. The reason that it's hard for me to listen to and really get behind it from, at least from my view of how a feminist art should be, I don't like this transactional nature, but perhaps I'm too limited. It's also worth mentioning that men, they really have to work hard, okay? Like, in order to be with men, like, you could sort of have a subtitle to this album. It's called Good News. It's not a very good title for the album. It doesn't really match the title of the album. I mean, the theme of the album. It's basically, you've got to work for this pussy. Like, that's sort of the underlying theme of the entire album. You have to work to be able to do it. But what's interesting is she repeats her criteria multiple times, and there's two criteria. One, which is dependent on your work ethic, and the other, which is dependent on birth, on genetics. You have to be rich, and you have to have a large penis. And these two things are repeated in many, many, many different ways throughout the entire album. And again, when we're talking about what causes men fear, this is it. This album is kind of designed to terrify insecure men who will never feel that they are going to be good enough, even if they get super rich. If they genetically weren't born one way, forget it. Even if they're born genetically a certain one way, but they haven't earned enough money, then just forget it. Men will never measure up to Megan Thee Stallion. Even her name, right? So many female rappers have, like Lil Kim, or even one of my favorite musicians of all time, Missy Elliott, Nicki Minaj, Cardi B. They have these names which are diminutives, right? Nicki, Missy, Cardi. I don't know if Cardi's diminutive. It sounds diminutive. Or their names are Lil. Megan. That's not Maggie. That's not Lil Maggie. It's Megan Thee Stallion. Stallion, which, is usually used as a way to describe male prowess, right? Like, if you refer to yourself as a stallion and you're a man, you're usually trying to say that you're a very good lover. Like, that's basically the only way it's ever said, that you're like large and in charge. And she's taking that name for herself. As much hunter as she is prey. It's just great. Now that I'm 18 minutes in, maybe I should, review the music, review the album. Like I tell you all the time, I don't review something if I don't like it. If I listened to this album and had all these great thoughts about Simone de Beauvoir and Brigitte Bardot, or thoughts that I think are great, you might hate them. Please put them in the comments if you don't like them. Or if you do. If I don't like the music, I'm not going to review it. There have been a lot of albums where I've listened to them and I've been like, oh my God, I have so many great things to say about it, but it's trash. So I loved listening to this album. I listened to it maybe 3 or 4 times. The main thing that really stands out is how good her flow is. Megan Thee Stallion is so confident in her delivery, and she never relies on using multiple voices. She never goes into a baby voice. She just has a really strong flow, very good rhymes. She doesn't really seem to rely on very many crutches. She seems to have a couple different personalities, but none of those personalities are too distinct. It's just Megan Thee Stallion, Megan Thee Stallion. Very good lyricism. Most of it's about body and sex, but not exclusively. A lot of it is larger in the larger context of self-worth and finding her own beauty and finding her own strength. And even if it is only about sex, which it's not, but even if it were, rap is always about how you say it, not what you say. This is why there can be albums that are genius albums of personal reflection and growth in the context of only rapping about how rich you are and how much crack you can sell. It's one of the amazing things about hip-hop as an art form, that you can talk about things which are pretty banal and sort of can seem meaningless or even empty, but say it in a way which is interesting to hear, right? Just like structurally, how are you going to present these ideas? How are you going to come up with different rhymes, different flows, like how are you going to work with the same goddamn theme over and over again, but make it interesting? But then also truer, deeper things can come out, even when these things that are being discussed seem so frivolous. As far as the production goes, this album is extremely well produced. This is the thing, okay? So I love Missy Elliott, but Missy Elliott sort of set up a template that very few people can follow. So she set up a template of being an awesome rap artist with very proud of her own sexuality, but that wasn't the main thing about her, just proud of her own ability, but she could also really, really sing. So her albums were this kind of mixture of like great hip hop, really well produced, and then sing-songy R&B, and she could kind of mix them together. But I often find that female rap artists get too drawn in to this sort of, I've also got to sing. And what I like about this album is she saves all of the I've got to sing, I've got to go pop until the end of the record. So it's all up front, it's really just a rap album, and it's a very strong rap album. I really enjoy the production. It's mostly kind of old school hip hop beats. Like there's not a lot of trap music. This doesn't sound totally anchored in 2020, right? It sounds a little bit more timeless, a little bit less trendy. Kind of a southern bounce thing happening a lot. I guess she's from Houston, which is great. I like Houston, kolaches. And there isn't a bad beat on this album. There aren't that many that like jump out as being like spectacular, but there isn't a bad beat on here. She relies a lot on a very catchy chorus, often kind of a dumb chorus, just sort of like a dumb earworm chorus to get you stuck in your head, kind of somewhat semi-idiotic, semi-smart chorus that you just end up keep on repeating. I watched an interview with her where apparently she used to only work with someone named Lil Ju and Juicy J, a couple different Southern producers, but this one she opens up a little bit more. But in general, I'd say it's very unified. It's not entirely unified, but it's mostly unified around 808 drum machines and bouncy, simple, old school sounding beats. But not intentionally old school, like throwback album, like just the soundscape. Sounds like it could have been made in 1999 as much as it was made in 2020. There's roughly 3 modes to this album, sort of what I call the spitting fire mode. And the album roughly follows this in chronology. There's a kind of spitting fire mode where she's just rapping and rapping and rapping, mostly about herself and her life. There's the sex raps, which is the majority of the album, and then there's the pop side. And what I'd like to do is I just want to play you, I want to start off by giving you 23 minutes in. I'm going to start off my review of the album a little bit more properly by playing you my favorite track off the album, Body, which I think is also the most exemplary song on the album. Very bouncy, kind of old school sounding beat that's done by Lil Ju. It's a very, that's spelled J-U, by the way. So it's a lot of ambiguous names in hip hop. There's a very catchy sound in the background. Like the chorus is just her saying body yaddy 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 yaddy. And this weird like fixation, this almost like mantra about her own body and about how great her body is. But it's a very catchy chorus, and the verse, I'm just going to read you some of the lyrics. It's an example of her lyricism, how she's able to come up with creative, kind of funny things. Look at how I bodied that, ate it up and gave it back. Yeah, you look good, but they still want to know where Megan at. Saucy like a barbecue, but you won't get your baby back. See me in the dress, he feel like he almost tasted that. Num, 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 num. Eat it up, foreplay, okay, 3, 2, 1. You know I'm the hottest, you ain't ever gotta heat me up. I'm present when I'm absent, speaking when I'm not there. All these bitches, scaredy cats, I call them Carol Baskins. Okay, so just, interesting correlation to, Netflix and the Tiger King show, although there's a whole feminist critique of Tiger King to be done as well. Tiger King is actually about the 2016 election, if you didn't know. If you did know, Good. If you didn't know, watch it again. You'd be like, oh my God, Skye, you're right. But just these kinds of lyrics, this kind of play, you know, saucy like barbecue, won't get your baby back, these weird sort of like very direct and frank sexual things. And she just delivers it in such a nice and strong way that, I don't know, you hear it and you just kind of go, damn, yeah, I'm present when I'm absent. What a great line. So I'm gonna just play a little bit of the chorus here so you get the idea of the sort of the sonic landscape of this album and the catchiness, and I'm gonna try and play it in under 14 seconds. Okay, I think that was under 14 seconds. We hear the sounds in there, just the kind of stupid repeating, going over and over again, actual pornography sounds playing in the back of women moaning, but it's all about this the materialism of the flesh, okay? We live in a material society, and she owns and controls this material very well, always in control. Great song, exemplary of a very good album. So I'll go through the rest of the tracks a little bit more quickly. The opening track is called Shots Fired. The first 2 times I listened to this, I didn't read the lyrics. I didn't pay attention. I didn't look it up on Rap Genius. I thought it was just a song about being some like badass rapper, and the lyrics are super good. And it seems like she's beefing with someone and she's just really strong and she just completely destroys this person. And then on the 3rd time, I read the lyrics and I remembered, oh, that's right. Over the summer, she was shot by some other musician, Tory Lanez. I don't know who this guy is. I don't know that much about music all the time. Sometimes I do, but sometimes I don't. I don't know who Tory Lanez is. But apparently he shot her in the foot. And there's a whole kind of scandal, and he had some kind of response to it. And this song is just quite amazing because she completely destroys this guy and makes it clear that whoever's with him is with a clout chaser. It even samples Juicy by the Notorious B.I.G., a really good beat by someone named Buddha Bless. And it's just vicious line after vicious line, as good of an attack song as you're ever going to hear. And then she even ties it into Breonna Taylor, which at first I was like, whoa, you getting shot in the foot by your boyfriend is very different than being murdered in your house by the police. But I think in a larger way, and if someone wants to do a racial analysis of this album, I think that'd be quite interesting as well. I'm not going to, but it is interesting drawing the parallels between the violence done against black women in America and the way that it's accepted, and perhaps the fact that we have just sort of accepted that this happened to her is in some ways a reflection of allowing this to happen to Breonna Taylor. I don't know. That's maybe getting a little bit too grandiose, but still, it's a great song. And I guess this is the thing where if you pay a lot of attention to, sorry, there's a woodpecker out my window. Oh, it's got a big red head. Oh, it's beautiful. I can't show you. You couldn't see it. There's like, you know, if you're listening, if you're paying attention to pop culture, this must be the thing that you think about. When you think of Megan Thee Stallion, you must be thinking, oh, she's got to talk about this, the tea and the disaster and the fire and the shooting and all that. So I guess she had to get it out of the way. The next track is called Circles. Again, just in this just spitting mode. Really cool empowerment anthem. A little bit too light on structure for me. My clothes fit tight, but my heart needs a seamstress. That's a good line. Crybaby is an interesting idea, and this is a theme that pops up on this album again. It makes me sort of wonder. It's my least favorite theme in this album, even more than the transactional nature of sex, is that the suffering of your sexual partner is good for you. So the song's called Crybaby, and it's all about and it's with DaBaby. And it's all about how, like, she's so happy that the person who she's sleeping with is sad that she's not calling back. Like, and her, like, exercising this power of, like, I dominate your emotions with my genitals. It's a little bit too sad. It makes me feel empathy for the people who have fallen for her. And the same thing happens, you know, when I listen to Drake, right? Drake does that all the time, you know, like, I don't love you, I just love my bed and my mommy. Okay, like, all that stuff. I don't know. It makes me uncomfortable. I don't think it's particularly nice. I don't like thinking of it in this way. I don't like thinking of having sex with somebody with the goal of hurting them later, right? Anyways, but again, always in control, always the hunter and the prey. She just says directly, don't fuck me like this, fuck me like that. Always intentionally giving these lines, which for the male audience listening, when you hear that, it makes you a little bit anxious. Like, I hope I can do it like that. I don't know even what she's talking about, but maybe I'm not good enough. God damn it. Why do women have any agency at all? Okay, this is kind of the stuff that goes on when men listen to this album. And I would argue that forcing men to feel this way is a good thing, because that's how women have had to think since the beginning of existence. Am I good enough to please this person? My worth on this planet is directly related to how I can please this person who has this power over me. Well, maybe that's why it's interesting that she now has the power. Then we get to the track Sugar Baby, which is what it sounds like. Again, this theme of transactional nature of love. Over and over again about how important it is that the person is rich and has a large penis. She even needs to know ahead of time. I don't know how you confirm these kinds of things ahead of time, but anyways. But again, it's all about, you had to buy me everything in my cart, all that. But at the same time, it's a great track. It's a cool kind of old school beat, very simplistic. Then we get to the song Do It on the Tip, which is just great. It's got the ding-da-ding 808 heart cowbell, one of my absolute favorite tracks on this album, one of my 3 favorite tracks on this album. She even kind of quotes Missy Elliott with ba-dum-ba-dum-dum. Great verse, great flow. She's really, really gifted. I really think she is. As a rapper, with her word choice and with her flow and just with the confidence and the strength. It's the strength behind her voice. Even most male rappers don't have this kind of strength behind their voice, right? Like I'm thinking sort of like Chuck D or Rakim or something, like just where you hear this confidence. And a lot of rappers are able to do a lot without confidence, right? Or they're able to do, they're able to achieve different emotions in their voice. She's able to just have this confidence, and it's great. Oh shit, I think I'm pregnant, but I don't see no belly. These bitches trying to come my way before they even ready. They premature. kind of an interesting line about her body and pregnancy. A very catchy chorus, do it on the dick, just over and over and over again. The City Girls come on and appear, another female rap group. It's really quite nice, a very strong track. The next one's called Movie, a little too trappish for me. In general, this album has avoided a lot of the trappings of trap music. That was unintentional. Avoided a lot of the trappings of trap music. But it has someone named Lil Durk, who has kind of a cool sing-songy voice, which I actually sort of like. I can buy the same thing that my man buys, she says constantly. So what's funny is that when she says this, she's accepting income inequality and the fact that it's rare for a woman to be able to buy the same things that a man can buy, even a woman as talented and as accomplished as Megan Thee Stallion. But also apparently Lil Durk says that the best wings are at strip clubs. I don't know if that's true. I've never eaten wings at strip clubs. I don't really understand. I would find it, isn't it gross? I mean, I've never eaten food at a strip club. Isn't it gross eating food next to naked people? I don't know. Sorry, I thought I heard something outside. That's the tangent police coming knocking on my door. The next track is called Freaky Girls with a chorus by SZA. And this is funny because it talks about how the chorus says, I just want a man who's not afraid of the pussy. Or a thug, actually, is what she says. But then a lot of the verses is all about how extraordinary her pussy is and how much you should be afraid of it and all these things that it can do. And it's sort of one of the great kind of this idea of how much men have to prove their worth constantly in this album. Awesome, cool, old school orchestra hits on this. Then comes Body, and then the second best song on the track, What's New. Again, it's just like a really cool old school beat, but has this really cool chorus you have to listen to, where the chorus goes, along with people saying like, fuck you. Just a really cool chorus. A little bit more of a developed example of her kind of simplistic chorus that gets stuck in your head. It's much better worked. It's much more better produced. It's really nice. Next track is called Work That, another song about how good she is at sex. Again, the division between intimacy and sex is seen everywhere throughout this album. Intimacy seems to be against the values of sex for the most part in this. And this whole thing, ride 'em like a rodeo. She actually quotes the Fat Boys at one point, the song Beatbox. And there's a lot of references to older hip hop throughout this album, which I don't know if like that's her thing, but it's very refreshing. It's nice to see quotes of the Fat Boys and NWA later and Missy Elliott, and there's all sorts of like backwards looking references. And on this track, she also shows off a fair amount of fast rapping, which she can also apparently do. She's a really talented rapper. The next track is called Intercourse. Subtle. It's got a reggae artist on here too. Oh man, he's just super gross. Your vagina so tiny. Ugh. God. That's a good beat, and it's nice to have the flow of the album broken up, a little bit of a reggae island sound. She does say at one point, "Look me in the eyes and tell me what you like about me," which is an awfully intimate detail thrown in here. This is maybe a little bit of sentimentality seeping in at the edges of an album which is attacking sentimentality at all times. Go Crazy is another amazingly produced track that's going back to an old, I think it's Hip Hop Hooray. It's quoting Naughty by Nature song, which samples the Jackson 5, which you can hear in the background. Another great Jackson 5 song. Last one was on the Busta Rhymes album. Kind of Hip Hop Hooray, integration of the sample on the ding, like just this little piano at the end. It's so well produced, a very catchy chorus, very bouncy, wonderful. Seriously, like Go Crazy, Do It on the Tip, Body, What's New. These are as good hip hop songs as have been made this entire year. Just great. Big Sean makes an appearance on here. I like it very much because his descending lines in the verse echo the descending nature of the synthesizer in the back, and her flow on the second verse is just great. Don't Rock Me to Sleep is where the album just goes, what? What? It's like an 80s pop song, absolutely out of nowhere. And she's singing, and I was so happy the whole time that like she wasn't going to do this whole Missy Elliott, Nicki Minaj, I can do an R&B album and a hip hop album at the same time. But it's good. It's not terrible. It's not intrusive. You can just stop the album with the previous track if you want and just have a hip hop album, or you can have the rest of the album which kind of goes off in this slightly poppy thing. It's quite nice. And it's sort of an anti-breakup song. It's a little bit more personal, a little bit more inviting. Outside is another kind of gentle track, kind of a synth pop track. And she says something here that's interesting. She says, I'm gonna be outside till I don't wanna be. I'm gonna show my ass because that's what they want to see. So this is sort of the whole album in a nutshell. She's saying that like she gets to determine where she is and what she does, but also she's gonna show her ass because that's what they want to see. I think this is kind of the paradox of her position, the paradox of her position and the paradox of a feminist approach to this album, that through patriarchy and through the leering eye of men and through the fact that sex sells and what sells about sex is the objectification of women, she's participating in that while simultaneously arguing for her own agency. So it's a middle point, I would say, towards a brighter future. These pop songs, though, are good. I actually like them. I mean, like when I listen to a Nicki Minaj album, I usually love her hip hop stuff and then skip completely her R&B stuff. This is much more listenable. There's a track with Beyonce. I don't know. I don't really like having Beyonce on here. I like the beat. It's by Juicy J, the guy from 3 6 Mafia. But I don't like Beyonce trying to act like other people, constantly trying to act like she's super tough and rapping about demon time and OnlyFans and TikTok. And it's like, you're the queen bee, you're the most influential pop singer in the world. You don't have to like always glom on to whatever young people are doing now. It's a little vampiric for me, but it's okay. I mean, it's good. I mean, especially when she sings. I don't like it so much when she does her faux rapping, but when she sings, her voice is beautiful. And spiritually, it's great having two different artists from Houston representing Houston in this way, because I really like the city of Houston. By the way, I've spent a lot of time in Austin, and I've spent a lot of time in Houston. And as a hipster douche, I'm supposed to prefer Austin. But let me just tell you, Houston is a much nicer city. I had better food in Houston. I saw a more interesting culture. There's the Rothko Chapel. It's just a great place. Austin's fine, but Really, Houston's a great place. Next track is called Girls in the Hood, a very conscious quote sampling of Boys in the Hood, the NWA song, more Eazy-E song, but NWA Eazy-E. I'm going to give you the lyrics to the verse as another example of her kind of lyricism and this idea that she has of being this stallion who's in control, the hunter more than just the prey. Put them legs on his head, now he loved tall women. Apparently she's very tall. You'll never catch me calling these N-words daddy. I ain't lying about my nut just to make an N-word happy. Lifestyle, when an N-word can't fit a magnum, it never happened if the dick wasn't snapping. So this whole thing is like the fact that she's tall, which is often seen as an undesirable trait in women. For some it's a desirable trait. But she's saying now, like, his whole preferences are going to be changed based on how I am. She's not going to lie about her orgasm. She's not going to accommodate for the insecurities and the ego and the weakness of her lover. And then she sort of makes this kind of spiritual attack on this man a more physical one by saying, instead of a lifestyle condom, he can't even fit into a large size condom, a magnum condom. So it seems like it's just about penis size, but I don't think it is. I think it's much more about this other thing, where somebody who constantly needs to be lied to in order to handle his own insecurity. It's great. In general, this album stays away from one of my least favorite traits of a lot of sort of aggressive female hip-hop albums of just like about other women, about just all these bitches and hating me and everyone's hating me, but I'm on top, I'm on top. There isn't too much of that on this album. In general, it's neither a sisterhood album, nor is it an anti-sisterhood album. It sort of stays away from that theme. In general, it stays away from this theme of just like I'm the top bitch and all the other bitches are dating, right? It's not, there's very little sort of woman-on-woman hatred here, which I think is a step up in the music. The album ends with Don't Stop with Young Thug. It doesn't really fit stylistically. Again, a little bit too much of a trap beat, a little too bass heavy. But the chorus is very nicely made with a cool kind of chorus sound in the back. And I like Young Thug, his kind of sing-songy verse, kind of like Lil Durk earlier. There's a lot of attention paid in this. She talks a lot about her weaves, her hair weaves, and there's a lot of attention drawn to her artificiality of her body. Cardi B does this as well, a fair amount. And it's an interesting aspect because the artificiality of a woman's hair or her nails or her breasts or her butt or whatever, it used to be that had to be hidden or not spoken about. But through hip hop, it's sort of put out there as like a thing to be accepted and embraced even. And it's an interesting change. And I think it has probably a liberating function on a lot of people who feel as though they have to pretend that they are something that they're not. To close out this very long review of this delightful album, I'm going to go back to Simone de Beauvoir and the way that she closed her entire essay on Brigitte Bardot. So Brigitte Bardot, she's making this argument that she is appearing sort of intentionally kind of babyish and sort of like a Lolita. And what she wants her to do is to get past that without losing this kind of aggressiveness, without losing this control that she has over her own sexuality. And that's what I would like from, I don't know, from Megan Thee Stallion, from Megan Thee Stallion, you know? I would very much like to see not losing any of this control, any of this sort of terrifying control and embracing of her own sexuality, but maybe maturing out of this part where it's sort of that men have to suffer to prove her strength, or that men have to give her something in exchange for her sex. So this is how Simone de Beauvoir, these are our closing words about Brigitte Bardot. I hope that she will mature, but not change. I think that's a good way to say it. I hope that this whole genre of female-led hip-hop that's very aggressively sexual, the wet-ass pussy movement, if we want to call it something. It was not the first song like that, but it's the most prominent. I hope that the wet-ass pussy movement matures past the transactional nature, but doesn't change in its embracing and imposing of female sexuality. All right. Well, it's Saturday morning. I got up early to do this. The light's been getting better as I've been going. I'm gonna go wake up my daughter and probably make some oatmeal. Okay, until next time, I look forward to reading your comments. There's the camera.